What's going on, guys? Welcome to another Lifestyle of Eden podcast. I'm your host, Nick Tognietti, and today I'm going to be discussing a very needed discussion, right? And it's on fertility in men and women. Fertility, I get a radical amount of fertility cases into my practice. In fact, it's probably one of the top cases that I get. I have had males as well, for sure, in fertility, but 90% of the time it's females coming to me. And if it's males that come to me, it's because the females are already working with me, and then therefore their husbands join as well because it takes two to tango. And so they don't know who it is. And so they just want to be sure. And I get to the roots and all of that good stuff. But fertility is such a hot topic. And the reason being is because 1 in 6 US adults, in fact, I think it's actually becoming more prevalent, according to some literatures, to about 1 in 4, but 1 in 6 US adults, male or female, have fertility issues. And the reason that rate isn't higher is because, by definition, to be statistically in that 1 in 6, that means that you are somebody who has been trying to get pregnant for a minimum of 12 months and have not been able to. So there's a lot of people that they started trying and it's been 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, or whatever it is, or they may have tried for 10 months and then they stopped trying and then they go, hey, I'm going to try again. And then they, whatever. So that statistic gets thrown off just because technically it has to be a minimum of 12 months straight. And that's not always the case. Sometimes people literally just say, hey, we're going to try for the next 6 months. And after 5 months, they get tired of it. And so then they go, okay, hey, we're just going to take a break and whatever. So that's the reason why it's not higher. But the reality is, if it's just, hey, how many people are not able to get pregnant necessarily, I think it's closer to 1 in 4. And the reason that it's becoming more rampant is the reason for everything else. Keep in mind, fertility is nothing short of metabolic, right? So we talk about how in 2023, the statistic came out that 93% of America is metabolically diseased, meaning some form of metabolic dysfunction takes place. When we say metabolic, we're talking about mitochondria. And so we're discussing hormones, we're discussing thyroid, we're discussing androgen pathogens, or androgens, we're talking weight loss, we're talking muscle gain, we're talking diabetes, we're talking pretty much everything. Dementia even is metabolic technically. And so because it's type 3 diabetes and PCOS, endometriosis, all of these things are metabolic. Keep in mind, this is what it takes to get pregnant for male or female. You've got to have all of these things in line. You've got to have hormones. You've got to have the ability to have your mitochondria clean so that you can even get pregnant. Remember, through mitochondria is what develops hormones, right? And so through mitochondria is what burns fat. Through mitochondria is what gives you energy. Through mitochondria is what's going to give you sleep. Through mitochondria is what's going to prevent inflammatory diseases. So the more that these things go up, then everything else goes up. And fertility is just a byproduct. So keep in mind, fertility, before I even get into this, fertility is not a root issue, ever. It's never a root issue. It's a symptom. It is a symptom of other things that are not being taken care of in the conventional medicine space. And so when we're discussing this, let's just start with men. And I've had success with both, by the way, where there are certain people that came to me. Number one, they could not get periods. I restore their periods that doctors couldn't fix in 5 years. I've actually had somebody who didn't have a period for 6 years. She's 23 years old, which means it stopped at 17 and doctors were never able to restore it. And then I restored it within 3 months. And so let's just discuss men for a minute, because male and female, I have very high success rate. In fact, just to be honest with you, I've never had anybody come to my practice for fertility that has not succeeded in getting pregnant. I've never had it happen. God willing, that continues, but it also takes clients just listening. So it's not a matter. I always tell people, a good coach is only as good as the client who's willing to listen to them. We're going to discuss a little bit on miscarriages as well, because this is a key component. Half the battle is getting pregnant, half the battle is staying pregnant. So when it comes to men, because that's a shorter issue that I'm not going to get really deep on, I would have to break down men and women like each in a separate podcast. With men, we're talking about two things for the most part, right? For the most part, it could be a couple things, but for the most part, one is inflammation. We have in medical literature where in the PubMeds, it shows us they did a study on rats. It's actually technically never been done on humans, but the same concepts work on humans with everything I'm about to tell you. And it is 100% identical to humans physiologically. On rats, what they did was they induced inflammation. And what they noticed was that the Leydig cells in the testicles were less able, significantly less able, to uptake cholesterol in order to produce androgens. So they noticed their testosterone radically dropped. Then what they did was they induced autophagy into these rats. And they noticed their Leydig cells, which autophagy is like a cell clean out, right? If you don't know about autophagy, go to my Sixth Pillar podcast and I have it in depth there. So I'm not going to discuss it in depth here. Go listen to it there. They induced autophagy and all of a sudden their testosterone skyrocketed. What's funny was I used to produce very low testosterone, and then I pushed autophagy for 6 months, and I induced I doubled my testosterone twice. It doubled once, and then it doubled again. So I did literally the same exact thing, right? That's the first reason: inflammation from insulin resistance, cortisol, gut issues. The list can go on and on. Lack of sleep, breaking my 7 pillars. And so if you have that inflammation, yeah, your Leydig cells are not going to produce healthy testosterone, and all of these different things with your androgens is going to be critical for making semen. But the second thing I actually think is even more important. I think it's even bigger than the inflammatory concepts with the Leydig cells, and it's your prostate. We never hear about people talking about prostate, not intellectually, not in a way that actually even people realize how big of a problem it is, but how to fix it. Keep in mind, prostate issues is the second highest issue and or cancer in the United States of America for men, second to skin cancer. In fact, 1 in 2 men over 80 have a prostate issue in the United States. 1 in 2. That is the same statistic for not only diabetes, it's the same statistic for dementia. So keep in mind, it's 1 in 2 for all 3 of those. That means there's a relationship between all 3. Prostate issues, the reason that this is really important is because prostate develops 30% of your sperm. And I might even add it develops the most important parts. There are enzymes that are actually very critical for getting the sperm to the egg within a woman, right? You need those enzymes. Then there's zinc that is literally making that sperm alive. And then you have the citric acid, which surrounds the sperm to protect it from getting killed. So the 30% of this, and what makes your sperm white, which if it's white, that means it's extremely healthy. This is coming from the prostate. Prostate issues are rampant. If you've seen my stories on social media or heard me or whatever, you know that I fix prostate literally regularly, just almost as much as I fix kidney disease, which is probably the most significant major organ issue that I have to deal with clients in reverse. And keep in mind, in Lifestyle of Being University that's launching at the end of this year, I have a class just on prostate and I have a class just on fertility. But with men, that's really the issue. And so getting into the prostate issues, now we're talking extreme cortisol, we're talking estrogen receptors. Notice I didn't say estrogen, I said estrogen receptors. Your cortisol issues are going to cause an estrogen issue, but the estrogen receptor issue, keep in mind, there are things that bind harder to the estrogen receptors than estrogen itself. In fact, EDCs, endocrine disrupting chemicals, bind to estrogen receptors at a higher rate than even estrogen, which is mind-boggling, by the way. Endocrine disrupting chemicals, we're talking like PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, that's in your farm fresh fish. Colorations, that's found in farm salmon. Farm salmon is actually white, and they put food coloring in it. So if you just look at the ingredients, it'll tell you food coloring. That salmon is actually white. Real sockeye salmon or certain king salmons that are wild caught, they're eating algae and things at the bottom of the sea that literally give it its orange color. Farm fresh doesn't have that, right? So with men, there's prostate that you've really got to fix, not just put a Band-Aid on. And a lot of people are like taking their prostates out. And I'm like, you're screwing yourself, number one. And number two, you're not fixing any issues. It's like getting It's like getting endometrial surgery. It's okay, but that tissue is going to just grow right back somewhere else. You're not fixing the issue. So with men, it's a little bit less tricky, but it's still an issue that a lot of people aren't able to fix, that I can fix, but it's because I'm looking at a lot more things. Like I said, prostate is so critical. Why do we never hear about that? Why do we never hear about prostate when it comes to fertility? Ever. I've never heard somebody other than myself talk about prostate when it comes to fertility, ever, which is, like I said, it's mind-boggling. It makes 30% of your sperm, and it's the second highest organ issue when it comes to men in the United States. With women, it's a bit more complicated. Okay. And so with women, there's plenty of reasons, but there's really top two. Top two is some form of estrogen progesterone issue, which I'll get to in a minute. And the second one is thyroid. Okay. So let's go thyroid first because it's a little bit shorter. And then either way, after I finish thyroid, the root of the thyroid is still the adrenals. It's still the cortisol that's going to cause the progesterone and estrogen issue. So either way, it's going to lead us back to that issue, but thyroid is a major one. Okay. And so thyroid, keep in mind, 50% of America has a hypothyroid. Okay. Autoimmune diseases are running rampant. 80% of those autoimmunes are Hashimoto's, which is of the thyroid. Hypothyroid is running rampant. When hypothyroid takes place, hypothyroid means your T3 is low. Keep in mind, out of the hormones that your thyroid actually makes, 90% of its T4, which is inactive, only 10% of its T3. Why? Which is funny because your T4 actually is not used by the body. T3 is active. T4 is very inactive. A very small part of it is active. And so what happens is T4, 90% of it, it lasts longer in the body. So it's like a reserve. So it goes into your cells. And there's an enzyme called deiodinase, and you have D1, D2, and D3. Deiodinase 1, deiodinase 2, deiodinase 3. And D1 and D2 are what's called ORD, outer ring deiodinase. They're on the outside of the enzyme. And what it does is it takes 33% of your T4 and converts it into free T3. Then you have D3, deiodinase 3, which is IRD, inner ring deiodinase. And it takes another 33% of your T4 and converts it into reverse T3, which is like a braking system that I won't get into deep here. And then the other 33%, your body basically just metabolizes it and pisses it out. And so when you have a cortisol issue or stress issue or a mercury issue, heavy metal issue, detox issue, inflammatory issue, whatever it is, lack of sleep, all these things causing cortisol essentially, then the conversion to free T3 stops. And it does that actually to save you, by the way. It's not a dysfunction, it's a proper function in order to save you. And so what happens is when free T3 gets low, your body starts thinking, hey, we're deficient in thyroid hormone. We need thyroid hormone. We need to make more thyroid hormone. So what happens? Keep in mind, when it comes to the body's hormones, you have basically an apostolic system, meaning there's order and structure. You have the owner, then the CEO, then the general manager, and then, all the workers, right? So the owner would be like the hypothalamus in the brain. It is what gives the direction from the top. It's the apostle. And then the pituitary in the brain is like the commander in chief or the CEO. And then whatever hormone or organ you're trying to hit, that next organ, let's say you go hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. Okay, boom, the adrenal is like the general manager. Hey, we need to make sure this hormone is coming out of this, hormone's coming out of this. And then you have the little workers in the adrenals. You have the aldosterone, you have the cortisol, you have the epinephrine, norepinephrine, right? That's the way it works. I just say that keep in mind that everything has to start at the hypothalamus. So when it comes to thyroid, no different. So starting at the hypothalamus, you have thyrotropin releasing hormone, TRH, and it's the head honcho. It's coming out to say, hey, fellas, let's line up. We need to make some more thyroid hormone. The T3 is low. I'm dispatching all arms to raise T3. Okay, cool. Hypothalamus in the brain triggers your pituitary in your brain. Now your pituitary goes, okay, we got the command from thyrotropin, let's release TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, which is going to go to your thyroid now and say, release more T4 and a little bit of T3, because that T4 is going to convert into T3. Here's the problem in male or female. When that thyrotropin goes up, one other hormone goes up, prolactin. We think of prolactin as like just you're lactating like a woman, but that's that's few and far between, right? You're not lactating all the time. Yet we see prolactins high all the time. There's only 3 reasons why prolactin, 4 reasons, depending on when you have sex, but 3 main reasons why prolactin is going to be high. One is going to be thyrotropin is high because there's a hypothyroid detection in the body. The second one is a prolactinoma, which is an oma is a tumor secreting hormone. So you have a tumor somewhere in your body and it's secreting rapid amounts of prolactinoma or prolactin. So it's an easy fix. You just literally go to an endocrinologist and get it surgically removed. It's very simple. And then the third thing is it's a stress hormone. So with thyroid, the third thing is you're lactating as a woman, right? So if prolactin goes up, prolactin does something very significant because it's a stress hormone. Like I said, it's a stress hormone. That's literally what it is. What it does is it completely reduces or halts the kisspeptin neurons in the brain. Kisspeptin neurons, this is actually a peptide that a lot of clinics are starting to utilize because so many people are having not only fertility issues, they're having menstrual cycle issues, which is really a fertility issue at its core. And so they're having both of these issues. So what are they doing? They're injecting kisspeptin, because what does kisspeptin do? You have these neurons in your brain called kisspeptin neurons. They trigger your hypothalamus to release GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone, which triggers your pituitary to release luteinizing hormone, LH, and follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, which then goes to your testicles, if you're a man, or your ovaries, if you're a woman, to now produce androgens, like testosterone, androstenedione, and all that. And then that converts or aromatizes by the aromatase enzyme in the ovaries or testicles into estrogen. So notice what happens. Thyroid is low. You have a hypothyroid for some reason, stress, all those things. Okay, great. So now the body says we need to release thyrotropin from the hypothalamus. Thyrotropin raises prolactin. Prolactin is a stress hormone that lowers kisspeptin. That means kisspeptin can no longer be released to release gonadotropin releasing hormone, which now if GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone, cannot trigger LH and FSH, then that means testosterone and androgens and follicle stimulating hormone, which literally gets a woman pregnant, by the way. It stimulates follicles, and one of those chosen 1 follicles every month will be the one that releases an egg. And so if you don't have that, now you literally can't get pregnant, right, for a woman. And so we have to fix the thyroid. But you can go on kisspeptin and all this stuff and be like, oh yeah, no, I'm going to go on this and blah, blah, blah. Okay, you're not fixing the issue. It doesn't matter. There's probably a good chance, 50% chance now you're going to have a miscarriage. Or, God forbid, you're going to have a preterm labor and your baby didn't get fully developed, which is happening rampantly too. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But either way, even with the thyroid, guess what? Why is your thyroid not converting T4 to T3? Because of a stress response. So now we have to go, well, where's the stress response? We're talking cortisol, which is what everybody is having a problem with today because they're not having boundaries. They're not having all these things that they need to be having. They're not following my 7 pillars of disease reversal, prevention, and longevity. And they're not really understanding the pillars. They think the pillars are just the pillars themselves. They don't realize how deep the pillars go on an individual level within your lifestyle, encapsulating every nuance of every breath that you take in every moment of your day. The pillars are so deep. Don't ever water down my pillars. So now we're talking about estrogen and progesterone because now we're talking about cortisol issues. One person could say, Nick, very little of your estrogen comes from your adrenals and only 1% of your progesterone comes from your adrenals. Yes, that's true. That is true. But what you're missing is that if your cortisol is jacked up, and your body is stressed out and prolactin can go up, now you're not even producing these things from your gonads, from testicles, ovaries, whatever. And not only that, if you're crazy inflamed due to sugar constantly running in the body because of cortisol and glucagon, Now you're so inflamed you can't even uptake cholesterol properly to produce any of these hormones. And so what we're seeing most of the time, keep in mind, you have two phases generally, two main phases to your period, right? You have follicular, you have follicular, you have ovulation, you have luteal, and then you have like your menstrual, right? You're bleeding. But the two like main phases that we discuss is follicular, which is kind of like the first 14-ish days, and then your luteal, which is like technically your last 14, maybe 13 or 12. But with that said, the luteal phase is when progesterone is supposed to spike. Ovulation happens right before luteal. So what's supposed to happen is you make an egg. Okay, boom, sperm hits that egg. It becomes fertilized. And now you go into luteal phase. And if it becomes fertilized, you're supposed to have progesterone spike to thicken your uterine lining to hold that egg and pregnant and baby so that implantation can happen. And then it's supposed to continue to spike estrogen and progesterone through your third trimester. The problem is people have such an adrenal and stress issue. They are not able to produce progesterone, right? They're not developing a corpus luteum, which is made every month and then it just goes away. It's really just made from your follicles breaking down and bursting because of your luteinizing hormone from an inflammation or enzymatic reaction, essentially. But when this happens, the progesterone doesn't spike. Or people are having estrogen not run properly as well. They're not able to convert or aromatize or any of these things. But the problem is, I see a lot of people, they don't have the progesterone spiking, number one, so they're not even able to get pregnant. But then the other half of people that get pregnant, they end up having a miscarriage. And I've seen this over and over again. They don't fix the issue fully. They started working on it, progesterone started spiking, they got pregnant, and then they stopped working on the issue. And then now their progesterone drops. Progesterone, like I said, will harden your uterine lining to keep you able to hold that baby through its term, but it will keep you from contractions. And if you have too much of early contractions, now you go into preterm labor. God forbid you're 25 weeks and you go into labor, 30 weeks you go into labor, all because of a progesterone issue. So what are doctors doing? They're like, oh, we'll just give you progesterone the whole time. Number one, that progesterone is 4 times more expensive than regular progesterone, which is stupid. They're just doing that because, oh, it's fertility progesterone. It's the same exact progesterone, molecule for molecule, as the progesterone that you'll get for dirt cheap at a clinic, by the way. So don't ever let a doctor just screw you on that. But so they're going to give you progesterone, but even then you have to time all this stuff right, where there's negative feedback loops, there's rejection within the cell danger response, all these things, and you wonder why so many people still can't make it. And I'm like, why didn't you just fix the root issue? Why are you wasting $30,000 on IVF and all these other things? I'm like, you just don't fix your issues. I'm sorry, like you just need to fix it, like straight up. Too many people are too like hastened. They're like, no, I got to get pregnant today. And I'm like, good luck, because you're not fixing your root causes. You're just going to have worse disease later on. Even if you get pregnant later on, you're just going to have worse disease because you're not fixing the problem. And then your kids are going to follow in the same footsteps and get the same sickness because you don't want to fix your issues. You don't want to fix your crap. You got to fix this stuff. The second thing that I see too is doctors will give women Femara. If you're a bodybuilder or ever were, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about when I say what Femara is. Femara is letrozole. If you were a bodybuilder of any type of caliber, like legitimate, not just, hey, I did it once and finished, but like you were really like a good bodybuilder, you know what letrozole is. Letrozole literally deletes your estrogen. It stops your aromatase enzyme, so you don't produce estrogen. They do that in bodybuilding to try to drop water and all that. I think it's a mistake, quite frankly. But nevertheless, that's what's going on. It deletes your estrogen. So what they do is they'll give you Femara as a woman in order to basically delete your estrogen, because then there's going to be a positive feedback loop that's going to force GnRH in the brain to raise up to say, hey, we need estrogen. So then it releases follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. And follicle stimulating hormone is what's responsible for creating estrogen, but it's also responsible for maturing those follicles that then will release an egg, right? So they're hoping that by giving you Femara, they induce ovulation. And then what happens is luteinizing hormone comes, it puts an inflammatory enzymatic reaction on that chosen follicle. The follicle breaks apart, becomes the corpus luteum, which now develops progesterone. But this doesn't work super well. Why? There's too many things that you're trying to do here. Because then they'll go, yeah, you take this, then boom, we're going to jump on this progesterone. Like the timing of it, it's just ridiculous. You are literally playing with fire, in my opinion. You're playing with the potential life of a baby. I think it's literally I think it's the biggest, I think it's debatably the biggest abomination in the medical field. Besides abortion itself. I think it's literally one of the biggest idolatries that people are spending money on and worshiping in the medical field. Literally, IVF alone, just for to get it started, is $35,000. You're not talking about the different rounds that you have to go throughout your IVF. It's literally a nightmare. So I say this to say, look, every case is different, but these are the things that you have to look at. These are the things that you have to consider. And this is what I teach a lot of my mentees, apart from just doing this work for my clients. But this is the stuff I got to teach my mentees because, like I said, it's rampant. It's 1 in 6. In fact, by that definition, it is statistically equivalent to the amount of kidney disease in the United States of America in adults. But I think it's closer to 1 in 4 because the statistic is a little bit janky, like I said, due to it's got to be 12 months straight and over to be considered that statistic. So if you stop at 8 months, then you don't really enter into that. And I know people that will try for 6 months and then they'll wear out and they'll be like, hey, we're going to take a break. We're going to go on some vacations. And then they'll try again. So it's, oh, technically you don't get to fall on that statistic because you didn't go 12 months straight. So if this is you, keep in mind 93% of the people in America have a metabolic disease. And so 93%. So don't think that you don't have it when you're listening to this. If you have prediabetes, if you have diabetes, if you have sex drive issues, if you have weight loss resistance, if you have energy issues, if you have sleep issues, the list goes on. If you have PCOS, if you have endometriosis, goodness, even if you have kidney disease or cortisol issues, guess what? You are one of the 93% of America who is metabolically diseased. You have to fix these things through my pillars. If you fix these things, you'll be able, with God's help, to get pregnant and fix those issues. Fix the root cause. Fertility is not your problem. The roots are the problem. Fertility is a symptom screaming out for you and I to get our crap together. So I know that this is a hot topic. I know it's very misunderstood. Quite frankly, half the stuff I just said, a doctor couldn't even explain. They don't understand the roots of these things. They just know little procedure concepts and, oh yeah, when this happens, this is what we were taught. We give this and then we give this, but we don't really know why. We don't know why this isn't working. We don't know what's going on. Come on, dude. Let's stop stealing people's money. Let's fix them up at the root. Let's send them home to be able to develop a family on their own and praise the Lord for not just the pregnancy, but for people getting healthy and getting their life back. So I hope that this helps, and I hope that it starts to spark some interest, not only in fertility and the fertility crisis, but also being that it's such a high statistic, I'm willing to bet you that everybody listening to this podcast knows somebody who either is going through a fertility struggle or has gone through a fertility struggle. So share this podcast, share this information. And if anybody needs discussion or consultation, anything like that, I'm more than happy to help you out. But also as a coach, you've got to be equipped to be able to fix these things. These are major markets. And when I say markets, I don't mean, oh, go make some money off this. I just mean like demographics. These are major demographics that we need to be able to fix, right? Imagine if we can save so many people hundreds and tens of thousands of dollars from the medical field by fixing their root causes and sending them home and they get to have their dream family. If this is something that you want to do, you need to get into my university. My university breaks this stuff down nuanced like you would never believe with incredible case studies, just magnifying everything that I'm telling you with a magnifying glass. It's just insane. Thank you guys. Stay tuned for the next episode.